Hey guys, it's Vicky, and today I am here with a book tag. This is the Reread Book Tag, and I wasn't tagged by anybody to do this video, but I saw Jasmine over at Jasmine Reads do it, and it seemed like a fun one. And yeah, it was created by Scally Dandling about the books, and it's about rereading, so let's get into it. So the first question is, where do you sit on the rereading scale from almost never to all the time? And I went back and looked, and so far in 2020 I have read 71 books, and 12 of them have been rereads. Now, that being said, part of that was I reread what was it, 6 books, 7 book? I don't even remember. The Lock and Key series was like 7 books, and it's a graphic novel series, so those were quick. So yeah, for this year, it was definitely higher than normal in terms of rereads, but yeah, 12 out of 71. So I'd say it's not a ton, but it's not almost never either. Question 2, has that changed over your reading life? And I would say it has, because when I was younger, I never would reread books. It just didn't happen. I figured I had too many things to read that I hadn't read before. With the exception of in high school, I reread The Bell Jar because I loved it. Other than that though, I never really reread books until probably in the last 5 or 6 years. So I'm fairly new to the reread. Question 3 is, when do you reread? Immediately after finishing a book, or not till years later, or when the mood strikes? For me, it's definitely been, the trend has been, I reread books that I haven't read in years, especially ones that I read in a different time of my life. So I find myself right now reading a lot of books that I loved as a middle grader and a teenager, because now that I'm, an adult, I want to revisit a lot of those books for not only the nostalgia, but also because I want to see if I feel differently about them. So typically that's what drives me to reread a book, is because I'm curious if I feel differently about it now that I'm in a different phase of my life. I also will sometimes reread books because I want the story fresh in my mind, because there's a movie adaptation coming out or something like that, and I don't totally remember the story. That was the case with the Lock and Key series this year. I reread that because it had been a few years since I read that series, and Netflix came out with their adaptation, and so I wanted to read it to, be able to really compare and have the story fresh in my mind. So that's another kind of motivation, but I'd say for the most part, it's because I want to see if I feel differently about them years down the road. Question 4 is, why do you reread books? And I sort of answered that already. I think a lot of it is because of curiosity, seeing if my feelings toward a book has changed because I've changed. Also just nostalgia in general. I'm rereading the Goosebumps series because I loved them as a kid, and I like reading them because of the nostalgia that it brings me. Question 5 is, how do you reread? Faster, slower, just the best bits? When I reread a book, I reread the whole thing. I don't think I could do just the best bits, because I don't know, I want the whole experience. Especially if you're talking about longer books, I want like the whole experience all over again. So I definitely think this year, for example, I reread Angela's Ashes, which is one of my favorite memoirs of all time. And I read it very slowly, and I really took my time with it because I was loving it so much that I didn't want it to end, and I really wanted to just take it in and process it. So I think for the most part, if I reread a book, it's definitely at a slower pace because I want to make it last. Question 6 is, who or what do you reread more specifically? Which authors or genres or individual books? Definitely there's series like Goosebumps that I am working on rereading. I find myself wanting to read and kind of have on my list to reread a lot of classics, because I think a lot of them were books that I read at a time when I had to read them. They were required reading. And so I didn't appreciate them as much, I think. And so I want to give them another go. I also, like I said, like to read books that were favorites when I was younger for nostalgia and for experimenting to see if I still like them. I will definitely probably go through and reread Stephen King throughout my life, especially the ones that are like on my favorites. Question 7, is there a book that you found better when you reread it? Better when I reread it. Well, the one that's like the most forefront of my mind right now is Angela's Ashes, and I think I found it better this time around because I am coming at that book now as a mother. And so a lot of the struggles that Frank McCourt's family had in his memoir with poverty and some of the just hardships that his mother went through, I really just identified with more because I'm a mom and I put myself in her shoes and just, you know, it was heartbreaking. And I think when I first read it as a 17-year-old, I didn't have that sort of perspective. It was definitely this time around, I think, even more sad. Where when I read it as a teen, I found it to be a little more funny and kind of quirky, which is weird now because now when I reread it, I was like, this is a really sad book. Like, why did I think this was funny, even though it does have funny parts? And the way that he sort of writes the story is sort of in a more lighthearted way, despite the subject matter. But yeah, it's a sad book, and I definitely saw more of the sadness this time around. And so yeah, I think this time around it was definitely a more affecting emotionally. Question 8 is, did you find one that was worse? I mean, some of the Goosebumps books, upon rereading them, I'm kind of like, they're good, but I didn't like love them like I did when I was 10. But I think that that's okay because these books, just like how I talked about coming at a book from, you know, coming at Angela's Ashes from a different life perspective, Goosebumps is the same way. I can't help but come at Goosebumps books as a 36-year-old woman. So 36-year-old Vicky, there's a lot of things that maybe just aren't as scary to her or whatever. But as a 10-year-old, I like loved every single one of those books. And the second a new one came, I was like, I gotta read it. I was like obsessed. So I definitely think, I still think they were good. They're good books and they're good series. They're fun series, but some of them, yeah, I don't think I think they're as good as I did when I was 10. And question 9, which one book have you reread the most? Obviously. This book, I read it twice in high school because I loved it so much. And I reread it again in college, just like randomly picked it up one day. And then a couple years ago, I read it again because I was like, okay, I've read it. High school Vicky has read it. College Vicky has read it. So now, like, you know, 30-ish mom, adult Vicky has to read it. So, and luckily, all 3 times I loved it so much. I feel like I've talked about this book enough on my channel, but the writing in this book is just, it's just stunning. I love it. It's so raw and poetic. Like, you can tell reading this book that Sylvia Plath is a poet first, you know, was a poet first. And I just loved this book so much. So many passages underlined and just some of the imagery and everything. I just love it. And I will definitely reread this again, probably in my 40s and then again in my 50s. And you know what I mean? It will definitely be one that I, throughout my life, continue to reread. All right, guys, so that is the Reread Book Tag. Let me know down below how you would answer some of these questions. What book have you reread the most? Or better yet, what book do you want to reread but you haven't yet? Because I'm sure everybody has a little bit of a list there. I definitely do. So yeah, let me know that down below. And I will link the original tag down below if you want to check it out. And the questions. So if you want to do this tag, you are tagged. You can do the tag. Have fun with it. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.